Ladies and gentlemen, this is a warning. Thank you.
MGM presents... That's me. MGM presents me as Hercule Poirot, the Belgian sleuth. Au revoir.
The Alphabet Murders is a 1965 detective film based on a killer targeting victims with the same letter initials. The concept was based on the novel The ABC Murders by Agatha Christie, but received rather middling reviews. Unfortunately, though, the film's concept seemed to have struck a chord with at least one viewer, because the plot would become reality for residents in Rochester, New York in the early 70s. To this day, the Alphabet Murders remain unsolved.
Goes on in San Francisco for the man known as the Zodiac Killer.
There could be a serial killer in Chicago.
The Oakland County child killer.
Phantom killer.
Frankfurt slasher.
4 children have now been murdered.
Has killed 5 and says he's going to kill again.
15 brutally murdered young women.
The pattern is the same.
One by one,
the death count started rising.
A man in a mask robbed, tied, and stabbed them.
Strangled, stuffed in burlap bags.
It is highly unlikely that these women were murdered by separate men.
Where will the killer strike next?
Police can't answer who or why.
That's the question that we'll never know.
I don't want to live the rest of my life wondering if this person's going to be caught.
I believe that there's someone out there that has knowledge.
And he's probably still at large.
It was the night of November 16th, 1971, when 10-year-old Carmen Colon left her house once here to pick up a prescription for one of her siblings at the former Jack's drugstore just a block away, formerly located in this vacant lot. Born in Puerto Rico, Carmen lived with her grandparents and normally was accompanied by one of them, but wanted to go alone today. The pharmacist told her the prescription had not been filled yet, and Carmen left. She was seen getting into a parked car nearby. Less than an hour later, the girl would be seen running along Interstate 490 West just before exit 3, naked from the waist down, while a car, possibly a Ford Pinto hatchback, reversed and got her back inside. Two days later, 2 boys riding their bikes turned onto Stearns Road when just ahead of them they spotted what they thought was a doll lying against a rock. It turned out to be the body of Carmen. Her autopsy would reveal she had been raped and strangled. People were incensed that no one stopped to help the girl when she was last seen. A reward that eventually totaled over $6,000 was put up for information. Billboards were erected along the highway asking for information, and many tips came in. The most promising were those on Miguel Colon, uncle to Carmen, who lived in the same house. 4 days after the murder, he returned to Puerto Rico, telling a friend he had done something wrong in Rochester. Furthermore, he owned a car that matched reports of the one seen on I-490, and tests showed that his car had been recently scrubbed completely clean. Detectives would travel down to question Miguel in March the following year, but before they arrived, the news of this was already in the press, and Miguel managed to escape again. After being on the run for weeks, he finally turned himself in and was extradited back to Rochester. Though he could provide no alibi, there was no evidence to link him, and he had to be let go. It was April 2nd, 1973, when 11-year-old Wanda Welkowitz was last seen buying groceries from Hillside Delicatessen. She left the store around 5:15 and headed down Conkey Avenue. Once again, many witnesses claim to have seen the girl struggling to carry the large grocery bag before a brown car stopped to talk to her near Conkey and B Avenues. 3 blocks north from there is another vacant lot that was the Walkowitz home. When Wanda hadn't returned 3 hours later, over 50 police officers began searching the area. The next day, an officer would discover her body at the bottom of the embankment along the access road to Route 104 rest stop in Webster. The position of her body indicated it had been thrown while the vehicle was in motion. Just across the river from Rochester, that rest stop has been closed permanently today, but the road still remains as it did almost 50 years prior. Like Carmen, Wanda had been raped. She had also been strangled, but this time it was with a belt from behind. Semen was collected along with tufts of white cat fur. The Walkowitzes did not own a cat. This time, 50 investigators were on the case, but they announced they doubted any link between the 2 killings. A $10,000 reward was put up, and local network WORK broadcast a 30-minute special on October 21, 1973, complete with a reenactment of the abduction. This is school number 33. About 7 months after Carmen's abduction, 11-year-old Michelle Manza left here to walk to her home at the end of Webster Crescent, just over half a mile away. Back on November 26, 1975, Michelle made a detour to go to the North Goodman Street shopping plaza to retrieve a purse that her mother had left earlier that day at the Super Safe store. This would be confirmed by the girl's uncle, who saw her as he was driving by. Approximately 10 minutes after that sighting, another witness said they saw the girl crying in a beige or tan car that was leaving the plaza's rear exit onto Ackerman Street, and it would turn onto Webster Avenue. The next believed sighting of Michelle was at this Burger King restaurant in the town of Panorama, about 15 miles southeast of her home. The original Panorama Plaza sign remains, but back then the Burger King was a Carol's restaurant, which was also a fast food burger joint. It was approximately 4:30 when a woman spotted a roughly 6-foot-tall, 165-pound Caucasian male between 25 and 35 exiting the store with a hamburger and bringing it to a girl resembling Michelle in his vehicle. 1 hour later, a further 11 miles east, roughly here on Route 350, a man saw a beige or tan car with a flat tire on the side of the road. As he stopped to offer help, he recalled that the man tried to hide a girl behind him and blocked his license plate from view. Five hours later, and 1 mile away, Michelle's body would be found in this ditch that is just past Mill Road in the town of Macedon. She had been raped and beaten, then strangled from behind, possibly with a rope. White cat fur was found on her body as well. In one of her clutched hands, leaves matching those in the area of the dump site were found, indicating she had been murdered there or somewhere nearby. This time, in addition to semen traces, a palm print was recovered. Though it was commonly believed Carmen was the work of a separate killer, all 3 victims have a startlingly similar background. Each came from a single mother home, were Catholic, and were each regarded as being loners who had been bullied. Wanda and Michelle were both fed prior to their murder, and after their rapes were redressed. They were both strangled from behind, while Carmen was killed by a more personal face-to-face method. Also of possible coincidence is the predominance of 3s in the case. C, M, and W are the 3rd, 13th, and 23rd letters of the alphabet. If you listen back to this episode, you will also notice an abundance of 3s, School 33, Route 33, etc. Also strange is that Michelle was left in Macedon, Wanda in Webster, and while Carmen was technically in Riga town lines, the towns of Churchville and Chilai were in close proximity. Miguel Colon would commit suicide in 1991 after non-fatally shooting his wife and brother. Over 800 suspects were interviewed during the immediate investigation, and though no one has been arrested, there are several suspects in the case. The first came with the 1976 murder of 7-year-old Michelle McMurray, which had many fear the alphabet killer had returned. Living with her mother in an apartment above this convenience store in the neighborhood just north of Carmen Colon, Michelle's mother would leave around 2 a.m. to head to a nearby bar. When she returned in an hour, she found her daughter's bed empty. It was only a half hour later when the girl's half-naked body was found in the driveway of the house next door. Though also having an alliterative name, being from a broken home, having been raped and strangled, police were quick to point out that the murder did not appear to be by the same killer due to differences in the attack. Though they had a suspect in the case, it would take over 30 years to link the apartment superintendent James Pressler to the murder. Police were able to secretly collect DNA from Pressler in 2007 and match it to DNA found on Michelle. Before he could go to trial though, Pressler died of a heart attack. His DNA was run against the other 3 girls and did not match. Another negative test came in 2010 after the body of Dennis Termini was exhumed. Known as the garage rapist, Termini was known to have raped at least 14 young girls from 1971 to 1973. He owned a beige vehicle and lived near where Michelle Manza was abducted. After getting into a chase with police after a failed abduction, Termini committed suicide in 1974. Next is serial killer Joseph Nazo, who murdered 6 prostitutes in California from 1977 to 1994. 4 of whom had alliterative names, including one coincidentally named Carmen Colon. The Rochester native lived here for a number of years before moving to California in the 80s. Though investigators noted many eerie similarities to alphabet murders, they could find no evidence that Joseph knew or cared about his victims' double initial names. The most famous of all suspects is one of the Hillside Stranglers, Kenneth Bianchi.
In Los Angeles, a killer the police are calling the Hillside Strangler has murdered 10 young women and left their bodies on the hillsides along the highways. Today, the police found another, number 11, they think.
2 young paper boys discovered what appeared to be the latest victim. The body had been dumped 15 feet down an embankment in a residential neighborhood. The victim was a woman, about 20 years old, and the body was nude.
There have been enough bodies found over a wide enough area to strongly suggest more than one killer, but police say they really don't know.
Today, the Los Angeles police say they have a suspect, a man in jail in another state.
Along with his cousin Angelo Buono, the pair used fake police badges to kidnap, rape, and then usually strangle women between 12 and 28 years old around Los Angeles from 1977 to 1979. Born in Rochester, Bianchi drove his vehicle similar to the suspect's car and worked as an ice cream vendor in the area near 2 of the murders. Though he denies any responsibility for the alphabet murders, he still remains a suspect. These 4 men, along with numerous other suspects, have all been cleared using DNA evidence collected off of Wanda Welkowitz's body, as that is the only usable DNA left. This means that if a separate killer murdered her, then any one of these people could still have been responsible. Another possibility is that the killer is still an as yet unknown person, and even worse, they may still be committing crimes.
Police
Police are hoping new leads will turn up in the cold case of a Macedon woman who disappeared 28 years ago today. Sandra Solly was 7 months pregnant when she disappeared. Her wallet discovered in a hedge in Rochester. Her dog's tags found in a trash can at a car wash in Penfield. In 2016, state police searched a Macedon property owned and sold by Solly's ex-husband. That search did not reveal any new clues.
The prime suspect in her case is her ex-husband, Ralph Soley Jr., who she claimed was the father of her child. Ralph refused to take the lie detector test or help the investigation at all. Sharon Schechter disappeared in 2001 from the nearby town of Gates. The 35-year-old mother of 3 was in the midst of a divorce when she was last seen at her house on Nettle Creek Road in Tarrenton.
17 years later, and Sharon Schechter is still listed as missing.
She was going to pick up her 3 children from her estranged husband's house. He lived in Shiloh at the time. Sharon never showed up to pick up the children.
That was back in December of 2001. Her children, now grown, still without answers about what actually happened to their mother. Schechter was reported missing on December 9th. Her van was found 3 days later in Gates.
The vehicle was located inside the Days Inn parking lot. It was confirmed that she did not rent a room at the Days Inn that night. Nobody knows how the vehicle got there. Nobody knows where the vehicle was before it arrived there.
Schechter was reported missing not by her husband, Alan, despite never showing up to pick up their kids at his house, but by her co-workers. Investigator Shannon says the recovered van paints a gruesome picture of what likely happened to the mother of 3.
Due to the amount of blood that was in the van, one could reasonably assume that nobody could survive that amount of blood loss.
Sharon and her husband were going through a custodial battle at the time of her disappearance, investigators say. And Alan, despite initially speaking with police, retained a lawyer after the van was discovered and stopped cooperating.
Sharon Schechter's body has not been recovered yet, so it's a challenge because we don't know exactly what happened to her. At this point, she's still listed as a missing person, but we're treating it as a homicide due to the circumstances.
Then, in early 2022, a TikToker posted a video that went viral.
I know this is what everyone's been waiting for, so these are the reasons why I believe that my grandfather may be the Rochester alphabet killer. So I'll be focusing mainly on the second victim, Wanda Walkowitz. So back in the day, my aunt was good friends with her, and because of that, my grandfather also knew her as well. During this time, my grandfather had a grocery store on Conkey Ave, and my family also lived on Conkey Ave and Avenue A. Now, the day Wanda disappeared, my grandfather did see and speak to her. Eyewitnesses told investigators that they seen Wanda walking home from a store with groceries. As she walked home, eyewitnesses also stated that she was seen talking to the driver of a brown vehicle. And at the time, my grandfather may have owned a brown station wagon. Now, going back to the victims, each victim was found with white cat hair on their clothes. Although my grandfather didn't own any cats, cats were often kept in the basement of the store to keep mice away from the supplies. Now, this is where it gets juicy. During the investigation of Wanda's disappearance, my grandfather had made the police a list of suspects because very early on, he was the first to offer a reward to anyone who had any information on Wanda's disappearance. And when only a body was found, it was reported that he was going around telling people that it was Wanda before the authorities could even confirm that information.
On his deathbed in 2020, her grandfather continued to maintain his innocence. Her DNA was collected to be compared to the DNA in Wanda's case. While it remains in the long queue, the Ortiz family, along with the families of the victims, can only wait, hoping their decades-long mystery may soon be solved.